Damien Foster was 34 years old, and 3 months earlier, he had arrived at a decision that would ultimately shatter his marriage but simultaneously rescue his future. He remained seated in his automobile outside the townhouse situated in the quiet suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, mentally practicing the deception he was preparing to deliver to his spouse. "Rebecca, I lost my position today." Before we continue with this incredible story, if you're new to this channel, please subscribe and don't forget to like this video. It really helps us a lot. 5 words. Straightforward and simple. Yet these 5 words would completely demolish the illusion he had been existing within for the previous 4 years of his life. This situation didn't involve some paranoid, insecure husband desperately searching for problems where none existed. Damien maintained a solid, respectable career as a senior marketing manager at a well-established regional healthcare corporation, generating an annual salary of approximately $92,000. His wife, Rebecca, worked part-time as a yoga instructor, contributing maybe 15 hours weekly to her classes and private sessions. They weren't living in wealth or luxury, but they were undeniably comfortable in their lifestyle. They owned a modest 2-bedroom townhouse in a decent neighborhood, enjoyed an annual vacation to the coastal regions once every year, and divided their household bills equally down the middle, precisely as any modern, progressive couple should operate in today's world. Or so Damien had genuinely believed until very recently. The uncomfortable reality was that Damien had begun noticing certain things, small, seemingly insignificant details at first that gradually accumulated into something far more disturbing. There was the particular manner in which Rebecca would physically tense up, her entire body becoming rigid whenever he casually mentioned his mother potentially visiting for a weekend stay. There was her sudden, almost obsessive preoccupation with their financial accounts, asking increasingly detailed and probing questions about his 401k retirement fund contributions and life insurance policy specifics and beneficiary designations. Then there was the noticeable shift in her social patterns and behavior. She had started going out more frequently with her close friend Miranda, returning home later and later each evening with vague, unconvincing explanations about ladies' nights at trendy bars and networking events that never seemed to have any concrete details or verifiable information attached to them. But the genuine, undeniable warning signal, the real red flag that changed everything, had materialized exactly 2 weeks ago, creating a moment that would forever alter Damien's perception of his marriage. Damien had departed from his workplace early that particular afternoon, suffering from an intense, debilitating migraine headache, something that occurred only rarely in his normally healthy routine. As he had walked through the front entrance of their shared home, he had detected Rebecca's voice drifting unmistakably from the kitchen area, sharp and animated and alive in a manner she absolutely never exhibited with him anymore during their increasingly strained interactions. The tone was completely different, excited, conspiratorial, energized in ways she hadn't been in his presence for many months now. "I'm telling you, Miranda, I just need to wait it out a little bit longer. Once we cross that 5-year anniversary mark, the alimony calculation changes completely in my favor." My attorney explained it clearly. The duration and amount increased significantly after 5 years of marriage. She had stopped speaking abruptly mid-sentence when she registered the unexpected sound of his footsteps approaching down the hallway. When Damien entered the kitchen space, Rebecca had been standing near the granite counter, phone pressed firmly against her ear, face noticeably flushed with color and what looked like guilt or surprise. She had quickly concluded the telephone call with a breezy, casual tone that sounded forced and unnatural. "Yeah, okay, sounds good. See you at class tomorrow afternoon," and then smiled at him as though absolutely nothing unusual or concerning or suspicious was happening. "Didn't expect you home so early today," she had said, her voice just a fraction too bright, too cheerful, too performative, the vocal equivalent of overacting. Damien had played along convincingly, mentioning the severe migraine, consuming some ibuprofen medication from the bathroom cabinet, and retreating to their bedroom to rest in darkness. But that overheard conversation fragment had burrowed deep into his consciousness like an insidious parasite, eating away relentlessly at his peace of mind and sense of security. 5-year mark. Alimony calculation. My attorney. They had been married for exactly 4 years and 7 months at that point. The mathematics and timing was impossible to ignore or rationalize away. For the subsequent 2 weeks following that revelation, Damien had observed his wife with completely new eyes, seeing patterns and behaviors he had previously dismissed or rationalized away as normal marital drift. He had noticed how she would physically pull away when he attempted to kiss her goodbye in the mornings, offering her cheek instead of her lips, a subtle but devastating rejection that spoke volumes. How she had stopped asking about his workday entirely, barely glancing up from her phone screen during their increasingly silent dinner times at the kitchen table. How she had systematically moved some of her clothing items and personal belongings into the guest room closet, claiming she needed more organizational space for her expanding wardrobe and yoga equipment. And then there were the financial maneuvers and manipulations that became increasingly obvious once he knew what to look for. Rebecca had started pushing him persistently and repeatedly to add her name to his personal investment account, the one he had built up entirely through his own savings before they had even met on that blind date 6 years ago. She had brought up this specific topic 3 separate times in the past month alone, strategically framing it as being a real team and showing genuine trust and commitment in their partnership and future together. When Damien had hesitated, expressing reasonable caution about combining finances that had always been separate, she had gotten cold and distant, delivering the punishing silent treatment for 2 full days, a manipulation tactic he now recognized clearly for what it truly was. That specific behavioral pattern was precisely when Damien had decided to execute a test, a strategic maneuver designed to reveal the truth hiding beneath the surface of his seemingly normal marriage. Damien had consulted initially with his own attorney first, establishing his own legal protection before making any moves. Her name was Patricia Morrison, a sharp, perceptive woman with penetrating eyes who had skillfully handled his close friend's complicated and contentious divorce proceedings 2 years earlier with impressive results. He had methodically laid out everything he had observed over recent weeks, every growing suspicion, every overheard word, every behavioral change and red flag that had accumulated. Patricia had leaned back casually in her leather office chair, fingers steepled thoughtfully together, and given him a long, measured, analytical look that spoke volumes about her extensive experience with cases exactly like this one. "What you're describing here is called strategic positioning," she had said with professional clarity and directness. "If your wife is genuinely planning to file for divorce, she's almost certainly been advised by her legal counsel to wait until you cross that 5-year marriage threshold. In North Carolina specifically, that milestone anniversary can significantly and dramatically impact both alimony duration and the calculation formulas used by the courts. It's an extremely common strategy among individuals seeking to maximize their financial outcomes from a divorce settlement. I see it constantly in my practice. So what exactly do I do?" Damien had asked, his stomach churning uncomfortably with a mixture of anxiety, anger, and betrayal. "You need concrete, documented proof," Patricia had replied directly, her tone businesslike. "Suspicions and gut feelings, no matter how strong or accurate, won't protect you adequately in court proceedings. But if you can document definitively and irrefutably that she's planning to leave and is only remaining in the marriage specifically for financial benefit and strategic positioning, that documented evidence can dramatically affect the settlement negotiations in your favor. Sometimes people reveal their true intentions and genuine character when they sincerely believe the money has suddenly disappeared or the financial situation has changed drastically." That crucial conversation and strategic advice had led directly to this moment. Damien sitting in his vehicle outside his own home, about to walk inside and deliver a carefully calculated lie specifically designed to expose the truth about his wife's intentions. He had set up his smartphone to record audio continuously in his jacket pocket, with the recording app running silently. Patricia had assured him confidently that in North Carolina he could legally record any conversations he was personally and directly part of, and as long as the recording phone remained on his person, even conversations he happened to overhear in his own home could be properly documented and potentially used for legal purposes. Damien took a deep, steadying breath, gathering his courage and resolve, and walked inside his home, fully prepared for whatever revelation awaited him. Rebecca was positioned in the living room area, comfortably curled up on their gray couch with her laptop computer open, probably scrolling mindlessly through social media feeds or texting with friends about trivial matters. She looked up when he entered through the front door, and he observed the briefest flash of annoyance cross her attractive features before she consciously rearranged her expression into something vaguely resembling concern or interest. "You're home early today," she said, echoing those exact same words from 2 weeks ago, a phrase that now carried sinister weight and meaning in Damien's mind. Damien set his leather briefcase down deliberately and heavily, making absolutely sure his movements and body language appeared weighted down, defeated, burdened by terrible news. "Rebecca, we need to talk seriously. Something significant and unexpected happened at work today." She closed her laptop with a soft click, and he could perceive the weariness in her eyes, not genuine concern for his well-being, but exhaustion at having to deal with yet another issue or problem that might complicate her carefully laid plans. "What is it?" I got fired today, Damien said clearly, letting his voice crack slightly for authenticity and emotional impact. They called me into the Human Resources office this morning without warning. Corporate budget cuts across multiple departments. They're eliminating my entire division effective immediately. I'm out. It's done. I have to clear my desk by Friday. For a split second, Rebecca's face went completely blank, utterly expressionless. Then, in rapid succession like a slideshow, Damien watched her cycle through a visible range of emotions. Shock, confusion, disbelief, and something else. Something that looked disturbingly and unmistakably close to panic rather than sympathy or support. You got fired? Her voice was noticeably higher than usual, strained and tight. But you've been working there for 6 solid years. How can they just, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter how they can or what their justification is, Damien interrupted, playing his designated part perfectly according to the script he'd mentally rehearsed. The point is it's done. It's finished. We're going to have to make some serious, significant changes to our lifestyle, Rebecca. I've got maybe 3 months of severance pay if I'm lucky, and then we're living entirely on your part-time yoga income and whatever minimal unemployment benefits I can qualify for through the state. We might have to sell the townhouse and move somewhere considerably cheaper, maybe even a small apartment. We might have to downsize our entire lifestyle dramatically. He watched her face drain of color visibly, the blood literally leaving her cheeks as the implications sank in. Sell the house. Damien, we've built equity here. We might not have any choice in the matter, he pressed on relentlessly, driving the fabricated crisis home. And that personal investment account I have, the one I built up before we got married? I'm probably going to need to drain it completely, liquidate everything, just to cover our basic living expenses while I search for a new position in this terrible job market. The market is absolutely terrible right now for marketing management positions. Could easily take 6 months or even longer to find something remotely comparable to what I had. Rebecca stood up abruptly from the couch, pacing toward the window with agitated, nervous energy. I need to process this. This is a lot to absorb all at once. I know it's a shock, Damien said with manufactured sympathy and understanding. I'm pretty devastated myself. This wasn't how I expected today to go at all. She nodded mechanically, but she wasn't looking at him anymore. Her eyes had that distant, calculating look he had seen increasingly lately, the unmistakable look of someone doing rapid mental mathematics, running scenarios and calculations, evaluating options and outcomes. I'm going to call Miranda. I just need to talk to someone about this. Is that okay with you? Of course, Damien said softly, playing the role of the understanding, supportive husband perfectly. Take your time. I'll be in the study if you need me for anything. Rebecca grabbed her phone urgently from the coffee table and hurried upstairs to their master bedroom, closing the door behind her with a decisive click that echoed through the house. What would become the most important and damning evidence of his entire life? Damien waited exactly 30 seconds, counting them carefully in his head, then quietly climbed the carpeted stairs, positioning himself strategically just outside the bedroom door where he could hear clearly. His phone continued recording everything in his jacket pocket, capturing what would become the most important and damning evidence of his entire life. He heard Rebecca's frantic, urgent whisper almost immediately, confirming every terrible suspicion he'd harbored. Miranda, we have a serious problem. A really serious problem. Damien just told me he got fired from his job. A pause as Miranda responded with something inaudible. No, I'm not kidding. I'm completely serious. This is real. This just happened today. Another pause while Miranda spoke. I know, but listen, this changes absolutely everything we planned. If he's not employed at a high-paying job, the alimony calculation is going to be based on unemployment benefits and whatever crappy, low-paying job he manages to find next. I could end up with almost nothing instead of what we carefully planned and calculated. Do you understand what I'm saying? Damien's heart hammered violently in his chest, but he kept his breathing quiet and controlled, continuing to listen as his marriage dissolved in real time just feet away from him. What do you mean, waited it out? Rebecca hissed with obvious frustration. Miranda, we're only 7 months away from the 5-year anniversary mark. You seriously think I can live with him, pretending everything's perfectly fine for 7 more months while he's unemployed and struggling and depressed? And what if he doesn't find another good job by then? What if he ends up in some mediocre position? My attorney told me explicitly and clearly that the alimony calculation is based primarily on his income at the specific time of separation. This situation could completely destroy everything we've worked toward. There was a pause as Miranda responded with something Damien couldn't hear through the door. No, I can't just cut my losses and file right now. 7 months of careful, patient waiting would be completely wasted, and I'd get almost nothing significant from this marriage. We planned this so carefully, remember? Wait until the 5-year mark, then file for divorce. He has that personal investment account worth about $43,000, and his 401k retirement account has maybe $90,000 accumulated in it. Split both of those plus alimony payments based on his $92,000 annual salary for at least 3 solid years. Miranda, we're talking about walking away with probably $200,000 total when you factor absolutely everything in strategically. That was the entire plan we developed together over months. Damien felt ice spread through his veins, cold and clarifying and absolutely rage-inducing. She had calculated it down to the exact dollar amounts. This wasn't merely a suspicion or an irrational fear on his part. This was a detailed, comprehensive strategy, a complete business plan for ending their marriage and extracting maximum financial value from the dissolution. What other choice do I possibly have? Rebecca continued, her voice taking on a desperate, almost frantic edge. I could stay and hope he finds another high-paying job soon, but that's a huge gamble. Boss. No, you're absolutely right. That's completely ridiculous and unrealistic. For all I know, he'll end up in some $60,000 mediocre position, and I'll have waited all this time for half of that pathetic amount. Maybe I should just file the papers now and take whatever I can get while his accounts are still substantial. At least the 401k is still worth something significant right now. She paused again, and when she spoke next, her voice had dropped even lower, more intimate and brutally honest. I know it seems cold and calculating, but you know what, Miranda? I stopped loving him about a year ago, maybe even longer than that if I'm being completely honest. He's boring. He's predictable and dull. He comes home from work, watches television, talks endlessly about his boring work friends and tedious office politics, goes to bed at 10 p.m. like he's 60 years old instead of 34. I'm 31 years old. I'm not spending the rest of my life like this, suffocating slowly in mediocrity and boredom. The money is just, it's what I'm owed, what I deserve for putting up with 4 years of this tedious, unfulfilling existence. I've earned it. Damien had heard more than enough. Far more than enough. He walked back downstairs on silent feet, his mind reeling but also crystallizing with absolute clarity and cold determination. Rebecca hadn't just been casually planning to leave him at some point. She had been actively and methodically calculating how to maximize her financial extraction from their marriage. She had stayed in a marriage she had completely and emotionally checked out of over a year ago, patiently waiting for the calendar to run out on that 5-year mark like it was some kind of investment maturity date or stock option vesting schedule. She had absolutely no idea what was coming next. No idea at all. Damien went directly into the study and closed the door firmly behind him, pulling out his phone to stop the recording with trembling hands. His hands were shaking noticeably, but not from sadness or grief, from rage, from the crystalline clarity of complete betrayal, from the shocking revelation of who his wife truly was beneath the mask she'd worn. He immediately called Patricia Morrison on her direct office line. I got it, he said when she answered on the second ring. Every single word. She laid out the whole plan in detail. Play it for me right now, Patricia said, her voice sharp and intensely professional. Damien played the recording from beginning to end, and he heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath halfway through the conversation. This is even better than I hoped for, she said when the recording finished playing. Damien, what she just described is called economic opportunism in divorce law. She's essentially admitted clearly that she's staying in the marriage solely and exclusively to increase her financial benefit. This recording could potentially eliminate or severely reduce any alimony claim she might make. This is gold. What do I do now? What are my next steps? Damien asked urgently. First, secure your assets immediately, Patricia instructed. Tomorrow morning, first thing, go to the bank and move exactly half the money from your joint accounts into a separate account in only your name. That's your legal right under marital property law. Second, change your beneficiaries on your life insurance policy and 401k retirement account immediately. Remove her as beneficiary. Third, we're going to file for divorce before she does, and we're going to include this recording as documented evidence of her mercenary intentions and strategic positioning. File first. Ernest's mind was spinning. Absolutely file first, Patricia confirmed. We're going to catch her completely off guard. She thinks she has 7 more comfortable months to position herself strategically. We're going to pull the rug out from under her this week. She'll never see it coming. Damien felt a grim smile cross his face. Do it. File everything. One more thing, Patricia added seriously. Don't let on that you know anything at all. Can you keep up the act convincingly for a few more days? I can do whatever it takes, Damien replied with cold determination. That night, Rebecca came downstairs around 8 p.m., her face carefully arranged into an expression of sympathetic concern that now looked transparently fake to Damien's newly awakened perception. Hey, she said softly, approaching him. I'm sorry I disappeared like that earlier. This is just such shocking, overwhelming news to process. Damien looked up from his laptop where he'd been pretending to browse job listings on employment websites. It's okay. I understand. I know it's scary and uncertain. She sat down next to him on the couch, and he felt her hand land on his shoulder in what was supposed to be a comforting gesture. The touch made his skin crawl with revulsion, but he didn't flinch or pull away. He maintained his performance perfectly. We'll figure it out, she said with false reassurance. We're a team, right? For better or worse, through everything. The bitter irony of those sacred wedding vows coming out of her mouth almost made Damien laugh out loud, but he kept his face neutral, even managed to look grateful and touched by her support. Thanks, Rebecca. That means a lot to hear you say that. She smiled, and it looked so genuine, so convincing, that for just a brief moment Damien questioned everything he'd heard. Could he have possibly misunderstood? Could there be some alternative explanation? Then she said, you should probably start looking into exactly how much unemployment compensation you'll qualify for, and we should sit down tomorrow and really look at our budget carefully, figure out what expenses we can cut immediately. She was already calculating, already analyzing the numbers, already figuring out whether it was worth staying in the marriage or cutting her losses and filing now. The mask slipped just slightly and Damien saw the calculation in her eyes. I will, Damien promised convincingly. First thing tomorrow morning. Rebecca stood up, stretching. I'm going to take a long bath and head to bed early. Today has been emotionally exhausting for both of us. Good night, Damien said, watching her walk away. He watched her walk away from him and he felt absolutely nothing. No sadness, no longing, not even anger anymore. Just a cold, calm, focused determination to make absolutely sure she didn't get away with what she'd so carefully planned. The next morning, Damien got up at 6 a.m., well before Rebecca was awake, and went through his morning routine mechanically. He went to the bank the moment it opened at 9 a.m. sharp and moved $4,300, exactly half, from their joint savings account into a brand new individual account with only his name. He changed his 401k beneficiary designation from Rebecca to his mother. He changed his life insurance beneficiary the same way, documenting everything. Then he went directly to Patricia Morrison's law office to sign the divorce papers and review the filing strategy. We're filing this afternoon, Patricia told him with satisfaction. She'll be served with papers probably by Thursday. That gives you approximately 2 days to prepare mentally for her reaction. What should I expect? Damien asked. Patricia smiled, and it wasn't particularly warm or comforting. Shock, anger, probably threats and accusations. She's going to realize instantly that her entire carefully constructed strategy just collapsed completely. Women like Rebecca, actually people like Rebecca, she corrected herself professionally, don't take well to having their plans disrupted. She thought she was in complete control of this situation. She was in control, Damien admitted, until she wasn't. Damien went home and continued his act flawlessly. He applied to several jobs online, making absolutely sure Rebecca could see him actively doing it, demonstrating his supposed job search efforts. He cooked dinner that evening, pasta with marinara sauce, nothing fancy or special. And they ate together in near silence, the quiet heavy with unspoken tension. Any luck with the job search today? Rebecca asked, her voice carefully casual but probing. Not yet, Damien replied. But I've only been looking for 2 days. These things take time, unfortunately. She nodded, pushing pasta around her plate without much appetite. How much severance did they give you exactly? What's the specific amount? 3 months of salary, Damien said. So about $23,000 before taxes are taken out. He saw her do the mental math instantly, watched her face tighten with concern and calculation. $23,000 wasn't nearly enough to maintain their current lifestyle for long. Not if he wasn't working and bringing in income. She was running her own calculations internally, probably trying to figure out if she should just file for divorce now or continue waiting as originally planned. That's not very much, she said finally, her disappointment barely concealed. No, Damien agreed. It's really not. Thursday afternoon, Damien was at his workplace, his actual job where he'd never been fired at all, when his phone buzzed with a text message from Patricia. She's been served. Papers were delivered at 2:47 p.m. Damien stared at the message, his heart pounding with adrenaline. It was done. No going back now. The plan was in motion. He waited knowing what was coming. His phone rang at 3:15 p.m. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. He let it ring 4 times before answering, building suspense. Hello? What the hell is this? Rebecca's voice was shaking, but not with sadness or hurt, with pure, undiluted fury. I just got served with divorce papers. Damien, what the hell is going on? You need to explain this right now. Damien kept his voice calm, controlled, almost cold. I think the papers are pretty self-explanatory, Rebecca. You can't just, we didn't even talk about this. You got fired 2 days ago and now you're divorcing me? This makes no sense. Actually, Damien said, enjoying this moment more than he probably should, I didn't get fired at all. I lied. I made the whole thing up. It was completely fabricated. There was complete, stunned silence on the other end of the line for several long seconds. What? Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. It was a test, Rebecca. And you failed spectacularly and completely. I don't understand what you're— Yes, you do, Damien interrupted firmly. You understand perfectly. I know about your plan. I know you've been waiting for the 5-year mark. I know you've been calculating alimony amounts and asset splits. I know you stopped loving me a year ago but stayed anyway for the money. I know everything. How do you— She stopped abruptly, and he could practically hear her mind racing frantically. You were listening that night. You listened to my private phone call. I did, Damien confirmed without shame. And I recorded it. And my attorney has that recording now. So here's exactly how this is going to go, Rebecca. You're going to accept a very reasonable divorce settlement that doesn't include any alimony, given that you've admitted on recording that you stayed in this marriage solely for financial gain and strategic positioning. Or we can go to court and I'll play that recording for a judge and let them decide how mercenary and calculating you really are. Your choice. You bastard, Rebecca hissed venomously. You manipulative bastard. Says the woman who calculated our marriage down to dollar amounts and investment account balances. Damien shot back. You played a game, Rebecca. You just didn't realize I knew I was playing too. You underestimated me. She hung up on him abruptly. Damien sat in his office, phone in hand, and felt something like peace settle over him for the first time in weeks. Patricia had been absolutely right. People reveal who they really are when they think the money is gone. Rebecca had revealed herself completely and utterly. What Rebecca didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly known, was that Damien's revelation was just beginning, and the consequences would ripple outward in ways far more devastating than she could possibly imagine. The night after Rebecca was served with divorce papers, Damien didn't go home to the townhouse. He texted her that he was staying at his friend Marcus's place while they figured things out, which was partially true. Marcus had indeed offered his guest room immediately, but Damien wasn't hiding or avoiding confrontation. He was strategizing for the next phase. Patricia Morrison had been crystal clear during their meeting. The next few weeks would be absolutely critical. Rebecca would likely consult with her own attorney, regroup her strategy and come back fighting hard. But Damien had significant advantages now: the damning recording, the element of complete surprise, and most importantly, the undeniable truth on his side. She's going to try to flip the narrative, Patricia had warned him during their meeting Friday morning. She'll claim she was just venting to a friend, that you took things out of context, that you manipulated her with a cruel test. Be prepared for that defense strategy. Damien had nodded, but he wasn't worried at all. The recording was damning, yes, but it wasn't his only evidence. Over the past 2 weeks, since he'd first overheard Rebecca's conversation, he'd been quietly documenting everything. Photographs of her systematically moving clothes to the guest room. Screenshots of her suddenly increased activity on a divorce support forum she thought was completely anonymous. Credit card statements showing repeated lunches with her attorney, charges for a family law firm in downtown Charlotte dated back 3 full months. Rebecca had been planning this divorce since August. The evidence was overwhelming. On Friday evening, Damien finally returned to the townhouse to collect some belongings. Rebecca's car was in the driveway and he could see lights on inside the house. He took a breath and walked in, prepared for confrontation. She was sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of her, her laptop open to what looked like legal documents. When she looked up at him, her eyes were red-rimmed but hard, defensive. We need to talk, she said firmly. Okay. Damien pulled out a chair and sat across from her at the table, maintaining physical and emotional distance. Rebecca folded her hands on the table. When she spoke, her voice was measured, controlled, clearly rehearsed. I spoke with my attorney. She says that recording you made might not even be admissible in court. North Carolina has complicated laws about that kind of thing. Your attorney is partially correct, Damien replied calmly. But even if the recording itself isn't admissible as direct evidence, I can testify under oath about what I heard. And you'd have to testify too under oath, and either perjure yourself or admit that yes, you were strategizing about when to file for divorce to maximize your financial benefit. Either way you lose. Rebecca's jaw tightened visibly. I was venting to a friend. People say things they don't mean when they're frustrated. For 3 months. Damien countered. Because that's how long you've been meeting with your divorce attorney, Rebecca. I have the credit card statements. Lunch at that bistro near your lawyer's office every other Tuesday since mid-August. Did you think I wouldn't notice the pattern? Her face paled noticeably. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself, Damien corrected. There's a significant difference. You were planning to ambush me. Rebecca, you were going to wait until you could maximize your financial payout, then hit me with papers when I least expected it. All I did was turn the tables before you could execute your plan. Rebecca stood abruptly, pacing to the window with agitated energy. You humiliated me. Do you have any idea what it felt like to have some stranger show up at my yoga class and serve me divorce papers in front of my students? In front of people I know. I know what it felt like to hear my wife calculate the value of our marriage like it was a stock portfolio, Damien replied quietly but firmly. I know what it felt like to hear you tell your friend you stopped loving me a year ago but stayed anyway for the money. So yes, Rebecca, I know exactly what humiliation feels like. She spun around and now there were tears streaming down her face. But Damien couldn't tell if they were genuine or strategic, real emotion or manipulation. He'd thought he knew this woman intimately. He'd been completely wrong about that. What do you want? Rebecca asked, her voice breaking. You clearly have all the power here. What's your end game? Damien pulled out a folder from his bag and slid it across the table. This is a proposed settlement agreement. You can have your attorney review it thoroughly, but the terms are non-negotiable. Rebecca snatched up the folder, flipping through the pages rapidly. He watched her eyes scan the contents, watched her expression shift from anger to disbelief to rage. This is insane, she said flatly. You're offering me almost nothing. I'm offering you exactly what you're entitled to by law, Damien corrected. We split the equity in the townhouse, about $17,000 for each of us after we pay off the remaining mortgage. You keep your car, I keep mine. We each keep our individual retirement accounts and investment accounts since we kept them completely separate throughout the marriage. And no alimony given the documented evidence that you stayed in the marriage for financial strategy rather than affection or commitment. The judge will never agree to no alimony, Rebecca protested. I gave up career opportunities to support your work. Damien raised an eyebrow skeptically. You worked 15 hours a week teaching yoga, Rebecca. You worked 15 hours a week when we first met. You didn't give up anything. You chose a part-time career that you enjoy, and I never once pressured you to work more. In fact, I consistently encouraged you to do what made you happy. I could have built a bigger client base, a real business. You could have, Damien interrupted. But you didn't. And that's not my responsibility or fault. You're 31 years old, healthy, educated, and fully capable of supporting yourself. The recording proves you stayed in this marriage as a financial strategy. No reasonable judge is going to reward that with alimony payments. Rebecca slammed the folder down on the table hard. I won't sign this. Absolutely not. Then we go to court, Damien said simply. And I present all my evidence and you explain to a judge why you hired a divorce attorney 3 months ago and were strategically waiting for the 5-year mark to file. Your choice entirely. They stared at each other across the kitchen table, the space between them filled with everything unsaid, everything broken and irreparable. Finally, Rebecca spoke, her voice cold. I want you out of this house tonight. Already planned on it, Damien replied, standing. I'll be back tomorrow with Marcus to get the rest of my things. My attorney will be in touch about the settlement timeline. He walked toward the door, then paused, turning back. For what it's worth, Rebecca, I really did love you. I thought we were building something real and lasting. I'm sorry you didn't feel the same way. She didn't respond, just stood there with her arms crossed defensively, watching him leave. Damien spent the weekend systematically moving his belongings out of the townhouse. Marcus and another close friend helped him load his furniture, his books, his clothes, all the accumulated pieces of a life he'd thought was permanent and secure. Rebecca wasn't there during the process. She'd apparently gone to stay with Miranda, avoiding the whole uncomfortable situation. On Monday morning, Patricia called with news. Rebecca's attorney reached out. She said they want to negotiate. What are they proposing? Damien asked. $30,000 cash plus 2 years of limited alimony at $1,500 per month. Essentially, they want you to pay her $66,000 total to go away quietly. Damien felt anger flare in his chest. She's not entitled to that. I know, Patricia said calmly. I told them our offer stands firm. But here's the interesting part. Her attorney mentioned that Rebecca has been struggling emotionally and financially. Apparently, the reality of her situation is setting in hard. What does that mean exactly? It means that the comfortable life she thought she was going to fund with your money is evaporating, Patricia explained. She can't afford the townhouse on her own with part-time yoga income. She's going to have to move, probably into a small apartment in a less desirable area. Her yoga income is around $2,000 a month, which in Charlotte isn't much at all. She built her whole exit strategy around walking away with a substantial nest egg. And now she's facing the reality of actually having to support herself completely on her own income. Damien should have felt satisfaction at that revelation. But mostly he just felt tired and empty. So what happens now? We wait, Patricia said. She has to accept reality eventually. The recording is too damaging and she knows it. The waiting was harder than Damien had anticipated. He'd moved into a one-bedroom apartment in the same general area, furnished it with the basics, and tried to settle into a new routine and normal life. Work became a refuge. At least there, things made sense, had predictable outcomes and clear goals. But everywhere he went in Charlotte, he saw pieces of his old life haunting him. The coffee shop where he and Rebecca used to grab lattes on lazy Sunday mornings. The hiking trail they'd walked dozens of times holding hands. The movie theater where they'd had their first date 6 years ago, when everything had seemed possible and beautiful. It was Miranda, Rebecca's friend, who finally broke the stalemate in an unexpected way. 3 weeks after the papers had been served, Damien got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Damien, it's Miranda Lopez, Rebecca's friend. Damien felt his defenses go up immediately. What do you want, Miranda? I need to talk to you. Not for Rebecca, for me, for my own conscience. Can we meet for coffee? Against his better judgment, Damien agreed. They met at a neutral cafe downtown, one he'd never been to with Rebecca, ensuring no painful memories. Miranda looked terrible, tired, drawn, guilty, haunted. I need to apologize, she said before Damien had even sat down. For my part in all of this. Damien waited, saying nothing, letting her speak. Rebecca told you she stopped loving you a year ago, Miranda continued. That's not true. Or at least it's not the whole truth. She was happy, Damien. Really happy with you. But she paused, her hands shaking around her coffee cup. I got divorced 2 years ago. Messy, awful divorce, but I walked away with $120,000 in settlement money, and I made the mistake of telling Rebecca about it in detail. Damien felt something cold settle in his stomach. I didn't mean to plant ideas, Miranda rushed on. But I was bitter. I'd been married to my ex for 7 years, supported him financially through law school, and when he made partner at his firm, he left me for his 25-year-old paralegal. I felt like that settlement money was the only good thing that came out of those years. And I think I made Rebecca start seeing her marriage to you through a financial lens instead of an emotional one. She's an adult, Damien said quietly. She made her own choices. I know, but I encouraged her when she'd complain about you. And honestly, Damien, they were normal complaints. You leave dishes in the sink sometimes. You fall asleep during movies. You're not the most romantic guy in the world. Normal stuff that every couple deals with. But I'd say things like, well, at least he makes good money. Or, you've put in 4 years. Might as well see it through to 5 for the alimony benefit. I turned her into this calculating person she wasn't before. I poisoned her perspective. Damien studied Miranda's face carefully, looking for deception. But all he saw was genuine remorse and guilt. Why are you telling me this? Because Rebecca's falling apart, Miranda said bluntly. She's lost weight. She's not sleeping. She's barely working or functioning. And I realized that I helped destroy something that might have been fixable if I hadn't been pouring poison in her ear for the past year. She wasn't a gold digger naturally, Damien. She became one because I taught her to think that way. That doesn't change what she did, Damien said. She still hired that attorney. She still made those calculations. She still stayed with me while planning to leave. I know. And she should face the consequences. I'm not asking you to take her back or anything like that. I needed you to know that the Rebecca you fell in love with was real. The person she became, I helped create that monster, and I'm sorry. Miranda left after that, and Damien sat alone with his coffee, trying to process what she'd told him. Could Rebecca have been influenced? Absolutely. But that didn't erase her choices. Adults were responsible for their own decisions, regardless of outside influence. Still, the conversation nagged at him. That night, Damien did something he'd been avoiding. He went through old photos on his computer, looking at their history together. There was Rebecca at their wedding, her smile radiant and genuine. Rebecca laughing at a joke he'd made at Thanksgiving dinner. Rebecca holding his hand during a sunset hike, looking at him like he was everything. When had that changed? When had she stopped seeing him as a partner and started seeing him as a meal ticket? His phone rang, interrupting his melancholy. Patricia Morrison. She's ready to sign, Patricia said without preamble. Rebecca accepted the original settlement offer. No alimony. Split the assets as proposed. Her attorney sent over the signed agreement this afternoon. Damien felt a strange mix of relief and hollowness. That's good. When's it final? We can file with the court tomorrow. Given that you've been separated for over 30 days and there's a signed agreement in place, the judge will likely grant the divorce within a few weeks. It'll be finalized quickly. Okay, Damien said. Do it. There's one more thing, Patricia added. Rebecca included a personal note with the settlement agreement. I'm not supposed to show you this, but... She paused. I think you should read it. She emailed him a scanned image. Damien opened it on his phone. The note was handwritten, Rebecca's familiar looping script. Damien, I'm signing your settlement because you're right. I don't deserve alimony. I don't deserve anything from you except maybe your contempt. Miranda told me she talked to you. I didn't ask her to, but I'm glad she did because there's something I need you to understand, even if you never forgive me. I did love you. I do love you. I just lost sight of what that meant. When Miranda told me about her divorce settlement, something broke in my brain. I started seeing our marriage as a safety net instead of a partnership. I started thinking about exit strategies instead of building a life together. And by the time I realized how twisted my thinking had become, I was already meeting with attorneys and calculating numbers. You deserve better than that. You deserved someone who valued you for who you are, not what you could provide financially. I'm sorry I became someone who couldn't do that. I hope you find someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved. And I hope someday I figure out how to be a better person than the one you discovered I'd become. Rebecca. Damien read the note 3 times. It didn't change anything. It didn't erase the betrayal or the calculation or the fact that she'd stayed in their marriage as a strategy. But it did make him sad in a way he hadn't expected because he believed she meant it. And that made everything worse somehow, knowing that the person she'd become wasn't who she'd wanted to be, but had become it anyway. He deleted the image and set his phone down. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in early December. Damien didn't go to the courthouse. There was no hearing required since they'd both signed the settlement agreement. He just got an email from Patricia with a PDF attachment, the final divorce decree. He was officially single again, officially free, and officially done with the worst chapter of his life. But Rebecca wasn't done facing consequences yet, and neither was Miranda, though she didn't know it yet. What happened next would change everything for both of them. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Damien's life had settled into a new normal. He'd made his 1-bedroom apartment actually feel like home, buying real furniture instead of the hastily acquired basics from the first few weeks. He'd started going to the gym regularly again, something he'd let slide during the final year of his marriage. He'd even gone on a few dates, nothing serious, but enough to remind himself that connection and intimacy were still possible. Work had become more than just a refuge. Damien had thrown himself into a major campaign for his company, a regional healthcare initiative that required creative thinking and long hours. His boss had noticed. 2 weeks ago, she called him into her office and offered him a promotion to marketing director with a salary bump to $108,000. You've been doing director-level work for months anyway, she'd said. It's time we recognize that officially. Damien had accepted, feeling something like pride for the first time in a long time. He was rebuilding, slowly, deliberately, but rebuilding nonetheless. He hadn't heard from Rebecca since the divorce was final, and he was fine with that. He'd blocked her on social media, though occasionally curiosity would make him unblock her temporarily just to see how she was doing. She'd moved into a small apartment on the east side of Charlotte in a complex that looked okay but unremarkable. Her yoga classes had apparently decreased. Her Instagram stories, which used to be daily, were now sporadic. She looked thinner in the photos, harder somehow. But she also looked determined. Damien would unblock, look for 5 minutes, then block her again. It was a ritual he wasn't proud of, but he wasn't ready to completely disconnect either. It was Marcus who told him about Miranda. They were at a sports bar watching a basketball game when Marcus casually mentioned, "Hey, didn't your ex-wife have a friend named Miranda?" Miranda Lopez? Damien felt a familiar tension. "Yeah, why? I saw her at the grocery store last week. She looked rough, man. I didn't say anything, but she was crying in the parking lot. Thought you should know." Damien frowned. "Why would I need to know that?" Marcus shrugged. "I don't know. She was part of that whole mess, right? But she also tried to make it right by telling you the truth. Just thought you'd care." The conversation bothered Damien more than it should have. He tried to push it aside, but it lingered. Finally, after 3 days of thinking about it, he did something impulsive. He called Miranda. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice wary. "Damien? Yeah. Can we talk?" They met at the same cafe where she'd apologized to him months ago. This time Miranda looked even worse. Her eyes were hollow. Her hands shook slightly when she picked up her coffee. "Are you okay?" Damien asked, surprising himself with the genuine concern in his voice. Miranda laughed bitterly. "Define okay. I'm alive. I'm employed. But otherwise not really." "What happened?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then the whole story spilled out. After her conversation with Damien, Miranda had been consumed with guilt about her role in Rebecca's transformation. She'd started seeing a therapist, trying to work through her own bitterness about her divorce and how she'd projected that onto her friend. But the real problem had started when Rebecca's situation became known professionally. Miranda's ex-husband, Trevor, whose former law partner knew Rebecca's attorney, had found out about Miranda's role in encouraging Rebecca's divorce strategy. "My ex, Trevor, he and Rebecca's attorney know each other professionally," Miranda explained. "Word got around about what happened with you and Rebecca, about the recording, the strategy, all of it. Trevor called me last month and told me he's reopening our divorce settlement." Damien felt his stomach drop. Can he do that? Apparently, yes, in certain circumstances. He's claiming I misrepresented my intentions during our divorce, that I told the court I wanted to reconcile when I was actually strategizing with an attorney about maximizing my payout, which... She paused. "Which is true. I did the same thing I encouraged Rebecca to do. I hired a divorce attorney 6 months before I told Trevor I wanted a divorce. I positioned myself strategically, and now he has evidence." "What evidence?" "Text messages. I texted Rebecca about my strategy while I was still married to Trevor. Things like playing the long game and making sure I get what I'm owed. Trevor's attorney subpoenaed my phone records as part of the reopening, and they found everything." Miranda's hands were really shaking now. "Damien, they could claw back a significant portion of my settlement. Maybe all of it. And I've already spent a lot of it, on my apartment, my car, a trip to Europe I took last year. I could end up in debt. Serious debt." Damien sat back in his chair, processing this. Part of him, the part that was still angry about what Miranda had done, felt a grim satisfaction. This was karma, pure and simple. But another part of him, the part that was trying to move forward rather than stay mired in bitterness, felt something closer to pity. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. Miranda looked up, surprised. "You're sorry? Why would you be sorry?" "Because what you did was wrong, but what you're facing seems disproportionate. And because you at least tried to make it right by telling me the truth. That counts for something." Tears welled up in Miranda's eyes. "I don't deserve your compassion. I helped destroy your marriage." "My marriage was destroyed the moment Rebecca decided to see me as a financial asset instead of a partner," Damien corrected gently. "You influenced that?" "Yes. But Rebecca made her choices. Adults are responsible for their own decisions." They sat in silence for a while, both processing the messy reality of consequences and responsibility. "What are you going to do?" Damien finally asked. Miranda wiped her eyes. "Fight it, I guess. Get a lawyer. Try to prove that even though my intentions were mercenary, the original settlement was still fair based on the marriage's actual circumstances. But honestly, I think I'm going to lose. And maybe I should." "Nobody deserves to be bankrupted," Damien said. "Maybe not. But I helped teach Rebecca to treat marriage like a business transaction, and I did the same thing to my own husband. Maybe this is just the universe making sure I understand exactly how much damage that kind of thinking causes. Damien left the cafe feeling unsettled. Miranda's situation was a stark reminder that consequences ripple outward in ways we can't always predict or control. That evening he did something he hadn't done in weeks. He unblocked Rebecca on social media and sent her a direct message. "We need to talk. It's about Miranda." Rebecca replied within 5 minutes. "What about her?" They agreed to meet for coffee the next day. It would be their first face-to-face interaction since the divorce was finalized. Damien saw her waiting when he arrived at the cafe. She looked different, thinner, yes, but also somehow more present, less distracted. When their eyes met, she didn't look away. "Hi," she said softly when he sat down. "Hi." They ordered coffee in awkward silence. Then Damien explained Miranda's situation. The reopened settlement, the text messages, the potential financial devastation. Rebecca's face went pale. "Oh my God. I didn't know. She didn't tell me." "I think she was too ashamed," Damien said. "But here's the thing, Rebecca. Miranda influenced you. But you made the ultimate decision to treat our marriage the way you did. And now she's facing consequences that seem worse than what you faced. That doesn't seem right." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe you could provide a statement for her case. Explain that while she gave you advice, you were ultimately responsible for your own choices. That she wasn't some mastermind manipulator. She was a bitter friend venting. And you chose to take that venting as a blueprint. Would that help her case? I don't know. Maybe. It might show that her influence was less calculated than Trevor's attorney is claiming." Rebecca studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Why do you care?" "Miranda helped ruin our marriage." "Because carrying around anger and bitterness about what happened is exhausting," Damien replied honestly. "And because revenge isn't the same thing as justice. Miranda doesn't deserve to be destroyed financially for giving bad advice, even if that advice was really bad." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I'll do it. I'll write a statement." "Thank you." They sipped their coffee in silence for a minute, and then Rebecca spoke again. "I started therapy 3 weeks ago," she said quietly. "I'm trying to figure out how I became the person who could do what I did to you, to us." "That's good," Damien said and meant it. "My therapist says I have issues with security. That growing up with parents who fought constantly about money made me hyper-focused on financial stability to the point where it overrode everything else, including emotional connection. That I started seeing relationships as transactions because that's how my parents' marriage functioned." "I didn't know that about your parents," Damien said. "I never told you. I was ashamed of it. But the therapist says that shame drove me to overcompensate by trying to secure myself financially, even at the expense of emotional connection." Damien absorbed this. It didn't excuse what Rebecca had done, but it did provide context. "Are you doing okay financially? I mean, are you managing?" Rebecca gave a small, sad smile. "I'm getting by. I picked up more yoga classes and I'm teaching a couple of corporate wellness sessions each week. It's tight, but I'm managing. And weirdly, I think I'm happier, or at least more honest with myself. I'm not living some fantasy life I built up in my head. I'm just living." "That's something," Damien said. "It is." Kelly paused. "Damien, I know my apology note didn't change anything, but I want you to know that I'm really genuinely sorry. Not just for what I did, but for who I became. You deserved so much better." "I know I did," Damien said simply. "But I also want you to know something. I forgive you." Rebecca's eyes widened. "What?" "I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, it wasn't. Not because I want to get back together, I don't. But because I don't want to carry that anger around anymore. Forgiving you is for me, not for you." Tears streamed down Rebecca's face. "I don't deserve that." "Probably not," Damien said. "But I'm giving it anyway." They talked for another hour, not about logistics or lawyers or settlements, but about life. Rebecca told him about the new meditation practice she'd started. Damien told her about his promotion. They talked about Marcus's upcoming wedding and whether the Panthers would ever win another playoff game. It wasn't the conversation of a married couple. But it wasn't the conversation of enemies either. It was something else. Two people who had once shared a life, acknowledging that while that life was over, they could both still move forward. When they parted ways, Rebecca gave him a quick, awkward hug. "Thank you," she whispered, for forgiving me for trying to help Miranda." "Take care of yourself, Rebecca," Damien replied. "You too." True to her word, Rebecca provided a detailed statement for Miranda's case. She explained the context of Miranda's advice, acknowledged her own role in choosing to act on it, and made clear that Miranda was not the architect of Rebecca's divorce strategy, just a bitter friend who'd vented about her own experiences. Combined with Damien's testimony, which Patricia helped him prepare, focusing on Miranda's eventual honesty and remorse, the statement helped Miranda's case significantly. The judge ultimately decided not to claw back the entire settlement but did reduce it by $35,000, which Miranda would have to repay over time. It wasn't a complete victory, but it wasn't total devastation either. Miranda reached out to Damien afterward, her text message simple. "Thank you for giving me a chance at redemption. I won't waste it." 3 months later, Damien was at Marcus's wedding when he saw someone across the room who made him pause. A woman about his age with warm eyes and an easy smile, talking animatedly with the bride. "Who is that?" he asked Marcus. "That's the bride's cousin, Sarah. She's a physical therapist. Just moved to Charlotte from Raleigh. Want me to introduce you?" Damien hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, I think I do." As Marcus led him across the room, Damien felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not hope that he'd find another Rebecca, or that this woman would be the one. Just simple, quiet hope that good things could still happen. That life could still surprise him in positive ways. That sometimes, after everything falls apart, you get a chance to build something new, something better, something real. The lesson Damien learned wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was simpler and more profound. People will reveal who they really are when tested. Some will fail that test spectacularly. Some will fail but find a way to grow from it. And some will surprise you by choosing honesty and growth over self-protection. The key was knowing which was which, protecting yourself accordingly but also leaving room for the possibility of change, in others and most importantly, in yourself. Rebecca had taught him what he wouldn't accept in a relationship. Miranda had taught him about the complexity of influence and responsibility. And his own experience had taught him that sometimes the most satisfying ending isn't revenge. It's letting go, moving forward, and building something better with the lessons you've learned. 6 months after his divorce, Damien Foster was dating someone who saw him for who he was. He'd advanced in his career. He'd maintained his dignity while protecting his interests. He'd forgiven the people who'd hurt him, not because they'd earned it, but because he deserved peace. And Rebecca? She was teaching yoga, going to therapy, and slowly rebuilding a life based on authenticity rather than calculation. She'd learned the hard way that treating relationships as transactions leaves you bankrupt in the ways that matter most. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming a better version of yourself while others deal with the consequences of their own choices. Damien had tested his wife and discovered a painful truth. But in facing that truth, documenting it, and protecting himself, he'd ultimately freed both of them to become better people than they'd been together. That was worth more than any settlement.